Alright gang, let's make a cool toy rocket in TinkerCAD. You can see what it's going to look like on the screen here. This is our finished product. Quick tour, you'll see we got a cylinder, a couple cones on top, some interesting little fins down low, and then some spheres on the sides for some cool looking window type things. Alright, so this is what we're going to do, and along the way we're going to learn a bunch of cool new tools. I'm going to start by moving this off to the side. So we have our finished product over there. And on our blank work plane, we're going to start by bringing in a cone. Click on cone and bring it in. And throughout this project here, you got to remember that if you hold down shift, it's going to lock proportions. That's going to be very important for us. So I'm going to hold down the shift key. I'm going to grab on the little gray handlebar. I'm going to pull this cone out. I'm going for a 40 millimeter base. So I'm going to pull it out to 40. Just like that. What that cone is right there, it's going to turn out to be this blue part. So just to keep us on track with our finished product there, I'm going to turn that one to blue. Now we need to do the red tip. I'm going to bring in another cone and drop that one in. The base of this cone is going to be 26 millimeters, so I'm going to hold down the shift key once again, grab that gray handlebar, pull this out just a little bit to 26. And remember, you can always click in those number fields too if you prefer, and just type them in as well. But I want this one to be nice and tall, so I'm going to grab that top gray handlebar and I'm going to pull it straight up. This time I'm not holding the shift key because I don't want to change my base. I just want to make it kind of tall, and I'm going for 75. And you can always type it in. Alright, and just to keep it aligned with our final product here, I'll change that to red. Now I will select both of these, and I will align them, coming up here and clicking on the Align key. And I'm going to align them in the middle on both the X and the Y axis. Right? So that's what our nose cone is going to look like. Alright, next step, let's do the body of our rocket here, and that is going to be a simple cylinder. So I will bring that one in. And our simple cylinder here is going to have a base of 40. So I will hold down Shift, click on the gray handlebar, pull it out. So both my X and Y are moving at the same time, and I'm going to get them to 40. Or if I get frustrated, I'll just click on the number field and type in 40 and 40. And then the height, we want this to be nice and tall. I'm going to grab that gray handlebar. I'm going to drag that one straight up. And again, I'm not holding shift on this one. I just want to bring it straight up, keep the base the same. I'm going to bring that one up to 100. There we go. Hey, one interesting little thing to point out here. If you look at this cylinder, if I zoom in a little bit, you might be able to see it better. Notice how there's like a bunch of little sides in there. In fact, if I go over at the slider, I can see right now the cylinder is actually a 20-sided polygon. The computer needs to work in polygons, so even the smooth things are still a polygon shape. You just add so many sides that it doesn't matter anymore, that the eye can't tell. But watch what happens when I take this slider and I crank it up. I'll crank it all the way up to 64. And yeah, if you look real close, you can still see some little lines in there. But when this thing is 3D printed, or if you're even just looking at it from a little bit further back, it's going to look like a pure cylinder without any sides at all. So it gives you a nicer looking product. So I'm going to leave that slider all the way over at 64. So this is a 64-sided polygon. Sure looks like a cylinder to me. All right, here's another new trick for you. Sorry about that zoom. Here's another new trick for you. I want to put this nose cone on top of this cylinder. To do that, I can move my work plane. Remember, the work plane is what we call this big blue plane that we are working on. Up here, there's a work plane button, and if I click on that, it allows me to move that work plane. Technically, it's where the Z-axis is 0, and I'm going to move it. Notice how my cursor kind of changes color when I slide over the top of that cylinder. It senses that I'm on top of an object, and it says, hey, do you want to move your work plane to the top of the cylinder? That's what I want to do. So I'll click there, and notice my work plane shifted and it changed color. That means that right now, on top of this work plane, on top of the cylinder, my work plane is there. That is my Z equals 0. If I select this nose cone, and there's a couple ways I can move this up to the work plane. Really quick way is to hit the letter D. and it just pops right up there. Let me undo that by doing Control Z, and it's going to move it down, because I also want to show you that I could grab it, not by the gray handlebar. The gray handlebar would change its size, but by the little black dots, that's going to actually move it. And notice on the side there, I have a negative, 55, 54 right now. And as I pull that up, it gets closer to 0. When I get that to 0, I'm on that work plane. Now when I move this thing around, it's going to move on that work plane, which is great because I want to make my nose cone on top of that cylinder so my rocket looks like it's all in one piece. To do that, I can align it. So I'll drag a box over both of those objects. Actually, I guess I got 3 objects there, 2 parts of the nose cone and the cylinder. I'll hit the Align key. I'm going to align it on the X and on the Y. And there you go. I got the start of a rocket. But I don't want my work plane to stay up there, so I'm going to click the work plane button again, and I'm going to click down on the bottom where it normally is. Alright, let me show you another cool trick. How to make these kind of interesting shaped fins out of some standard primitive shapes. I'm going to start by grabbing a cylinder. So I'll click on cylinder and bring it in. And then I want to make that cylinder stretch it out a little bit. So I'm going to grab that gray handlebar. I'm going to stretch it out. And this one I want to be 75 by 35. I think I'll click on the number fields and type it in. 75, going to hit tab, 35. Perfect. All right, now this will be a great trick to do if I'm looking at it from the top. So I'm going to click on top on the view cube. I'm looking at it from dead on from the top, and I need to get 2 more shapes in here. One shape is going to be a box, but instead of grabbing a regular box, I'm going to grab the box over here that's already set up to be a hole. So when I click on that and bring it in, it's already kind of gray striped like that. That's going to be my hole. Or really, I'm going to use this like a cutter. And what I want to do is cut this cylinder in half. So I'm going to grab one of the little gray handlebars. I'm going to bring it up to about there. Then I'll grab this other gray handlebar and I bring it down to right there, so that I'm pretty much cutting the cylinder in half. And hey, real quick, I noticed that I got some little lines here on my cylinder. Let me click on my cylinder, and just like I did with the main body of our rocket ship, I want to crank up the sides just so it gets a lot smoother. There we go, looks a lot better. Okay, so now I could cut this thing in half and I would have half of a cylinder, but I don't want half a cylinder. I want that cool kind of fin shape to go on the bottom of my rocket. So here's the trick. I'm going to click on my cylinder. I'm going to do Control D for duplicate. And if you're not doing Control D, remember you can always come up here and use these buttons up there. That one right there is duplicate. So now I have 2 of these cylinders. I'm going to pull one off to the side. I'm going to turn it into a hole. So that 2 is going to be my cutter. Now I can take this cylinder, just kind of place it somewhere where it's going to look cool. And you might be able to see it now. What's left in that orange part, it's starting to look like the fin that is on that rocket. I think right about there looks good for me. Right. So I have 3 objects: a cylinder, which is a solid shape, a cylinder, which is a hole, and a big cube, which is a hole. I'm going to select all of them, and when I group them, give it a second, computer thinks and it cuts that out. So now you can see I got a cool little fin. Alright, but it's a little too tall right now. Let me click on it, and on the height slider I'm going to bring that down to maybe about 5. Yeah, we'll go 5 millimeters. Alright, it's starting to look like something. Okay, but I only have 1 and I need 4 of them, so let me duplicate this. I'll select it, hit Control D for duplicate. So now I have 2 of them, right? There's 2 little fins sitting right there on top of each other. If I come up to the mirror command right up there, if I click mirror, it's going to flip this thing for me in whatever direction I tell it, one of the 3 dimensions, right? I could flip it that way, I could flip it that way, or I could flip it that way. That's the way I want to do it. So now I have 2 of them. Let me just take that one and slide it straight out. And hey, another trick for you, if you hold down Shift when you're moving stuff around, it will lock it into just one direction. So I can only move this on the X-axis now. I can't slide it back and forth on the Y. Alright, I think I'll take it to about there for right now. Just taking a look at it and just making it look cool. Okay, almost there. Just got to put this thing together. Hey, there's one last trick I want to show you though. Notice how my finished rocket over here, it has a bunch of different colors. But when I click on it, it's all one object. You can see the little blue highlight goes over everything. So this thing is a grouped object, but it has multiple colors in it. And if you look up here on the solids section, you see how it has this little rainbow in there. To do that, so you can have multiple colors in one object, what you want to do is make sure that your objects are the right color before you group anything together. So instead of having an orange rocket, I'm going to click on this one, and I guess I'll keep it consistent with my finished copy. I'll go for kind of a gray, and I like the blue and the red nose cone. How about on this one, I'll go for some red fins. So instead of orange, I'll select those and go for some red things. But when I group these things together, normally if I hit group, it's all going to turn into one color, in this case blue. But if I click on the little color selector and I go to multicolor, it will leave the colors of the objects whatever they originally were, but it's still grouped. It's still all one object. Let's put these fins together here. I'm going to grab these guys and bring them over. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it for right now and see if I can get them, spaced fairly well. I think they need to be a little further apart, so I'll select one, and I'm going to use my arrow keys a lot in the next few minutes here. So I'm going to open up those fins a little bit. That's looking good. When I move them into the body of the rocket, I think they're going to be spaced properly. Maybe a little bit more. I'm not worried necessarily if they're aligned perfectly. I'll do that with my aligned key in a second. All right, I think that's looking good. I'm going to select both of those guys, both of those fins. At this point, I want to group them together. And now I need to rotate them so that they'll be up and facing straight up on the z-axis. So I have a couple of curved arrows here, but that's not going to allow me to rotate in the direction I want. I got to orbit my view a little bit. And now I can see that other curvy arrow that allows me to rotate on that axis. So I'm going to click on that one. And I'll type in 90 degrees. And that's going to flip them straight up for me. And now I can use my align key to align them all up. So I'll select everything, hit the align button, and align it on the X, and align it on the Y. All right, getting close here to being done. Now I just need to take those fins. I only have 2 of them. I need to have 4 of them. So I'm going to select the fins that are up in the perfect position. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate. Control D, duplicate. I'm going to hit that little curvy arrow. And I'll do 90 degrees. All right, and I don't need to worry about aligning anything at all. It's all perfectly in the middle. And man, my rocket is looking really cool. All right. One small thing though, if you notice down on the bottom, our fins, they're kind of pointy. That would be okay, but one of the cool things you can do with this rocket is 3D print it, and it won't stand flat on a table if it has these little points, or it would be harder to make it stand. So let's chop those things off. Let's chop off those points. I'm going to select my entire rocket. I might as well group it right now too, because the fins aren't grouped to the rest of it. So I'll group it. It's all one object. And I want to move this up to the work plane. Again, I could grab this little black arrow and pull it up, but a little bit faster. I'll just hit the D key, and D puts it right on the work plane. All right, now let me chop off the bottom there by grabbing a box, and not a regular box, but a box that is a hole. And I'll drag in a box. I'm going to make it super big. Don't really care how big, just really big. I do care how tall though, so when I grab the Z-axis handlebar there, that little gray square, I'm going to shrink this down, and I think I'll go for like a 0.5 or so. I'm sorry, a 5. So it's 5 millimeters. It should just whack off the points there a little bit. All right, I'll just drag it over there. Again, I don't have to worry about getting it in a particular spot, just making sure that it's on there, right? And so then when I select everything, and say group, it's going to cut off the bottom of my little points. And I'll hit the letter D, and that brings it down to the bottom. All right, hey, one last little finishing touch here. It's kind of cool to put these little spheres on there. I don't know, windows, I don't know what they would be on our little toy rocket, but they make it look a little cooler. So this one, a little bit of artistic work here. I'm just going to grab a sphere and bring it in. And then this is one just to kind of play around with, especially with like the arrow keys, just moving it, on the X and the Y and a little bit on the Z axis. For now, I'm just going to kind of try to drag it in, roughly in place there. All right, so that's not too bad. I'm going to start mashing on the keys, or on the arrow keys here, and see what I can do until it looks like it's pointing out just right. Kind of orbit around here, see what it looks like. Maybe sticking out just a little bit more. So that's one just to kind of play with until it looks right to you. I'm going to start by making the top one, so I'm going to bring it up until it's about the height that I want. Kind of orbit around, make sure it's looking cool. All right, now I need to just duplicate that a couple times here, so I'll do Control D. And so I have two spheres there. I'm going to grab one of them and bring it straight down by using the little black Z slider there. And then I'll do Control D again, duplicate again, and I bet the computer's smart enough to say, hey, you did this once, you want me to duplicate it a second time at that same spacing so it all looks lined up perfect and cool. And yeah, I got two awesome rockets. All right, guys, hope you had fun with that one.